Hey guys, Callista here with Avalili Permaculture and the Earth Skills Institute. I thought I'd just post a video today in response to some questions that I've been getting and that I've been seeing on a lot of the online groups and forums of late around when to start seeds, when to plant seeds, when they can plant outside, when they can plant in their greenhouse. So I'm going to give you guys a little context on where I'm located just so you can have a reference there. I'm located in southeastern British Columbia, and the climate here, if you Google the plant hardiness zone, says it's a zone 4B, although I would argue that it's more like a zone 4A, possibly even a 3B. We do certainly get some winters where it gets down to well below -30 for several days. So right now the daytime temperatures are usually getting up to around between +4 and +10. Nighttime temperatures are still getting down to, around -3, 4, 5, 6. And we're right here at the very end of March, and I'm in my greenhouse, and I'll give you guys a quick little round tour here. These beds behind me are already planted, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There's my seedlings started there in the trays on the shelf. Okay, so these beds here are all planted. They're already seeded and should be popping up here over the next few days with all of my cold crops. And those are things like lettuce, spinach, radishes, peas, anything that tolerates or even prefers cooler weather. And I usually seed those in my greenhouse at the end of March, the last week in March, and then I usually end up having harvestable greens at around Earth Day, so sort of the second or third week of April is when I typically get fresh greens out of here, and then that'll go through, until sort of mid-May, and then it starts to get too hot in here for them. Now, when you are trying to, if you wanted to start all of your crops that take a longer time to mature, which gives you a huge advantage if you do that in colder climates like this, because we just don't have a long enough growing season to plant some of these things from seed and actually get anything out of them. And those are your things like your tomatoes, your peppers, eggplants, leeks, even chard can be given a head start. And then all of your brassicas, so that's your things like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, and a lot of the herbs as well. So in my trays that I had mentioned that I had started, these guys are already planted in there and given them a head start. And I don't leave them out here at night because it gets too cold. I just have them in here during the day while it's nice and toasty. Some of them I do have on a heat mat. So I'll just show you this here. If I move this guy, you can see there's a heat mat here. It's plugged in. That keeps some of my seeds warm. So my hot crops that like to have a warm soil temperature in order to germinate need to be on a heat mat, or they may not germinate. And those are things like peppers, especially tomatoes, cucumbers, but I don't start my cucumbers just yet. I'll talk about that here in a sec. So all of these guys, I like to give them a good head start. I wouldn't like, you can plant those as early as February. I wouldn't start them any later than like the third week in March, just because they won't get big enough for you to really give them much of a benefit starting them that late. So definitely don't start them any later than the third week in March. Another thing to note is if you don't have a good setup for starting seeds indoors ahead of time, don't bother with it. Your seedlings will struggle, and your garden will struggle as a result of starting them off in poor conditions. So once it's too hot in my greenhouse here for my cold crops, I'm going to be planting my hot crops in here again mid-May-ish. That's why I've started those seeds there. And about 3 weeks before my last sort of frost date, when I'm planning on planting everything outside, I will start things like squash and cucumber and corn. These are things that typically can take quite a long time, and just in order to get the most out of my growing season, I like to start those a little bit early. You don't want to start those any earlier than 3 weeks before you plan on planting them out, because they get really big really fast, and if they're too big, they're really hard to transplant. They have the tendency to break off, so don't start those any more than 3 weeks ahead of when you plan on planting them out. Now for outside planting, I plan to seed all of my cold crops outside as soon as like the top 1.5 to 2 inches of soil is thawed and workable. So hopefully here in the next like week or two, if the weather keeps the way it has been, I'll be able to plant all my cold crops outside as well, so that when my cold crops in my greenhouse are done, I'll have another flush outside as well. So there's that. And I will also seed my carrots and beets as soon as possible. You can actually fall seed those and they'll just pop up when they're ready in the springtime. You can fall seed all of your cold crops pretty much, even in a greenhouse situation. You can plant those in the fall and they'll just pop up when they're ready. Don't worry about nighttime temperatures getting too cold still. They'll tolerate that, and they'll just germinate when the soil temperature is consistently warm enough for them. And then as soon as the soil is workable to, about that 6 to 8 inches mark, then I'll be planting, my garlic and stuff. If you seed garlic in the springtime, I'd really recommend doing that in the fall, but if you're going to do it in the spring, do it as early as possible. So as soon as you can get down deep enough to actually fit a head of garlic in there, do it. And then potatoes, the same thing. You can dig those down and stick them in there as well as soon as possible. So yeah, that's that. And then for things that like hotter temperatures, like a lot of your beans require warmer soil temperatures, as well as corn. You don't want to plant those until, things that typically like warmer soil temperatures, you don't want to plant those until it's, well and good after your last frost date. So I won't be planting any of that stuff here until at least the May long weekend. That's like the 3rd weekend in May. So that's kind of how I plan my planting schedule. And then you can also start seeds, more cold crops kind of later towards the end of August. You can start those again for a fall flush as well. So like the 3rd week in August, you could seed those as well for a late season flush of cold crops. Thanks for watching, guys. If you didn't know, I do have a Facebook page as well as an Instagram account. So if you're on social media, please find me there as well and follow me. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions about anything related to self-sufficiency, gardening, growing food, compost, like anything related to permaculture or kind of traditional primitive skills, foraging, that kind of a thing, please just email me or ask the questions in the comments for my videos, and I will try my best to answer as many of them as I can here. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope everybody's well and not losing their sanity right now. Stay tuned.